All right, final feelings. Georgia taking out Georgia Tech in 8 overtimes. It's just a game that people are never going to forget, to be honest with you. I've gone to Tech, Georgia every year since 1993, with the exception of the 2001 game, which was Mark Richt's first game in Atlanta. I had to go to a wedding, and that couple got divorced. Nonetheless, so I've seen a lot of these games, and that was definitely, anytime you go into overtime, you think about the 14 game, you think about the 13 game, 1999. All the overtime games are always just like wild. Well, this one was wilder than anyone. This will probably go down. Well, I'm watching the final 2 games of college football in the regular season right now, and unless BYU, Houston goes some whack job way, Georgia Tech will be the game of the year in the regular season. There's a lot of different ways to look at this game. Had Georgia lost, it would be complete failure. I mean, with all of the resources, with all of the, with everything Georgia's got that Georgia Tech doesn't, to lose this game is just really unacceptable. And it doesn't mean your program's a failure, but it does mean you failed that day. And it means that, for the next year, you got to hear about it from all the Tech folks. And the Tech folks are going to act like this was a win, which it wasn't. I can assure you right now it was not a win. But, Georgia didn't lose. They won. And there's a big difference between winning and losing. We saw that this weekend. There was a really purposeful reason that I waited to record this. There were 2 reasons that I waited to record this until Saturday night going into Sunday. First of all, the game got done so late Friday night going into Saturday that, that was a tremendously long game, an hour longer than a typical game. A typical game is about 3 hours and 20 minutes. This was 4 hours and 20 minutes. So it's one of the longest games Georgia's ever played. It's the longest game in terms of, it's the second longest game in college football history. In terms of time, it is one of the longest games Georgia's ever played. I would have to go back and look at time. Because once you get over a 4-hour game, you've been there for a long time, and almost all of those are overtime games. And then secondly, I wanted to see what happened the rest of the weekend, and let me tell you, a lot happened. And, when you see Miami lose, when you see Ohio State lose, and when you watch the Texas A&M game and gives you the result and you know where you're going at that point, this is clearly a season where, either Oregon is better than everybody else, which, I mean, they might be. It doesn't seem like, I think Ohio State is the best team in college football, in terms of talent. They don't have the coaching. They don't have the cohesiveness. There's no reason to fail the way they did against Michigan. It's just not acceptable, to be honest with you. I mean, Ryan Day failed them completely today. For Georgia, when they play the way they're capable of, they're the best team in the country. It's either them or Texas or Oregon. I used to say Ohio State, and I think you could throw Alabama in there, but I just don't think Alabama's going to get into the playoff. I think this week has all but crystallized where you're going with things. Now, I don't know all the ramifications because the Big 12 is such nuts, but it seems to me that, Penn State and Oregon are in no matter what. Georgia, Tennessee, Texas are in no matter what. But let's forget it. Let's say certain teams lose. Let's say Georgia loses the SEC championship. Georgia's going to be in. And on Friday night after the game, you hear Heather Dinich talking about how and I think she actually does a good job, but this is the problem with folks that are on TV. There's too much wiggle room. There should be more definitive statements, guys, or everyone, not guys. There was pretty much no way Georgia's going to not get into the playoff after they beat Georgia Tech. Didn't matter how it happened, but now you look forward at it, and Texas and Georgia are in. That's 2 spots. Tennessee, they're in. That's 3. Big Ten is going to eat up a lot of spots. Indiana, Penn State, Oregon. I think those guys are in. I think Ohio State is going to be in. That's 7 spots from the Big Ten and the SEC, okay? Then you have the other 3 mandated spots, which are the ACC Championship, and it sure looks like SMU is in no matter what. And then you have, the Big 12 Championship, which I think you need like some sort of Rubik's Cube to figure out. And then you have the Group of 5, which is going to come down to UNLV and Boise. And so there's like 1 spot possibly hanging out, and this assumes that Miami doesn't go. I also didn't mention Notre Dame. So I just don't see, it's going to be very challenging for the 3-loss SEC teams, Ole Miss, South Carolina, who had a great win today against Clemson. It's going to be very hard for them to come in, and that's why it was even sort of stranger to after the discussion of after Georgia beating Tech, to have this discussion of, well, they might not be in. No, dog. I mean, it's not like, let's not overdo it. Now, let me get back to the game. Georgia's got to start playing better at the beginning of this game offensively. And defensively, the problem really was the defense against Tech. Like, Tech really played well. I thought Tech outcoached Georgia for an extended period of time during the game. Like, I did not understand at all why Kirby went for 2. Yeah, I didn't understand that. And I know he's, like, I get it. He's way more vastly smarter about all this stuff than we are, than any person probably in college football. And I'm not being facetious, but that was a just strange decision. I mean, just kick the extra point. Like, then you're chasing points. And as it turns out, it almost cost them the game, because that last play, you just kicking an extra point, not to tie it, to go to overtime, but to win it. And that's probably how that game should have ended. And this was not like 2014, where Georgia Tech got the shot to win it in overtime, after a Georgia mistake. They did. They just didn't win the game. There was no, miracle kick and all this stuff. Georgia could have lost that game. Georgia Tech earned a win, but they didn't. Now, that's a problem if you're Tech. And I'm saying this with, like, I'm not talking bad about, like, Tech. That's not what this is. This is not a video to run Tech down. You can go somewhere else, or people can make fun of them or whatever. Brent Key has done a great job at Tech. He's done a great job. Now, they're 7-5. They played Georgia really hard. They beat Miami. But like, let's not get too excited about what's going on at Georgia Tech. Like, he's done a great job. I think what I mean to say about all this is, Georgia's got to understand, the players on the team, that for Tech, they're always going to play their best game against Georgia. That's been the case almost throughout history. Georgia is Tech's biggest game every year, no matter what. Doesn't matter if they're running the triple option or they're pass happy, like back in the early 80s, whatever it was. I mean, when they were throwing the ball a lot more than they did, it doesn't matter. Like, Haynes Kings make some miraculous recovery. I mean, like, you should expect every single stop to be thrown out when Tech is coming at you, because they value that game in many ways more than Georgia does. Now, the Georgia people want to call me out in the comment sections, or I get phone calls from Georgia people. Hey, look, man, I've been around the block for a while. I think I understand Tech, Georgia, and it's a more important game for Tech. The absolute worst case scenario for Georgia is losing that game. And when I say worst case, I mean for the year. There is nothing worse for Georgia than losing to Georgia Tech. There's nothing worse. Now, that may sound like, hey, what do you like? Trust me, that's what it is. I mean, it's bad, and it's probably, I guess it's like when Michigan State beats Michigan, or South Carolina beats Clemson, stuff like that. I guess Auburn, Alabama, but like, this is like Tennessee, Vanderbilt, sort of. Tech's higher up than that, but Georgia's got to understand that Tech feeds off the energy from Sanford Stadium. It doesn't bother them. They're cool with it. Now, it did affect them sometimes, but they use that to amp themselves up. They never play in that situation. They don't play in games where there's 93,000 people there. I mean, Clemson's got 80,000 people. Like, it's not the same. So, I think the players at Georgia have got to understand that better. They're not playing well at the beginning of these games. And I got to say, man, like, I'm not about running kids down, and what I'm about to say is not running guys down, but got to catch the ball, guys. Like, it's you're not championship material if you're you will not win championships by dropping balls. And for people who want to get at Carson and like, what's he doing on TikTok? Man, the guy's throwing touchdowns is what he's doing on TikTok. He's out here throwing touchdowns, saving Georgia. He's all they got. This is not, I mean, like, Nate Frazier is doing all he can do. He's fumbling too much too, by the way. Like, too many fumbles. I mean, he's got to protect the ball. This team still is not where they're going to be by the time they get into a terminal game, which is 3 weeks from now. Or 4 weeks from now, depending on what happens against Texas in the championship game. This team is not at its terminal moment. We are sitting, though, at championship season. I call it Stetson season. We've entered Stetson season, which is where you win or lose championships. And your quarterback has got to do it. Well, guess who's doing it right now? Carson Beck. They do not win that game with that. I mean, like, what interceptions are you going to point to, Carson haters? Like, and like, when he deserves to be hated on, cool. But, like, please acknowledge how well he played and has played since, I guess Florida? I don't know. I mean, like, he didn't play bad against Ole Miss. That's not what that was. So he's kind of on a hot streak here. That second to last drive, well, I think it was 8 plays. I know it was 75 yards. That was a thing of beauty. He went 6 of 8. I just wrote about this. This guy went 6 of 8. I'm recording it. It's about to be 20 degrees outside. He went 6 of 8 on that drive with just, it was a thing of beauty. And then, fast forward 3 plays later, and Dan Jackson just absolutely crushed his Haynes King. And on the targeting front, look, I don't know what targeting is. And I don't think anybody does. And, when you have a 4-minute commercial break after a fumble, if you can't determine it's targeting, then it's not targeting. And, for Tech, that was, I believe you were in a punting situation at that point. That was 3rd and whatever, short. And the ball, let me just say this, okay? So you're probably punting the ball anyway. I think if my math was correct, that's what was next for Tech. They'd have been 4th and 2 or something like that. Well, it would have been, they could say it's targeting. That would be a first down, obviously. But, I mean, if he doesn't fumble the ball, then you're punting, right? That wasn't obvious targeting necessarily to me. There was another play that was obvious targeting to me, and they didn't throw it. The officiating was straight up bad Friday night. But the officiating's bad, y'all. I mean, it's bad. And it's going to cost someone a game, yeah. But, like, the pass interferences, I don't understand what pass interference was. The one that was called Smile Munden was bizarre to me. The one that was not called, I think it was Oscar Delp. That was, I mean, I didn't understand that at all. But I just, I don't know. I'm not gonna sit here like I act like I know everything. I know this: Georgia clawed its way back. Tech earned that win, but they didn't get it, and you got to go take it. And against Georgia, we're getting close to Alabama territory where you got to kill them twice. I mean, Alabama did. They had to, though, man, because I was getting, really dicey at Bryant-Denny. The only team that Georgia's just kind of gotten beaten by is Ole Miss, and they're nowhere to be found. They're not going to be in the playoff. And, Georgia, to me, has got to get it together, generally speaking. Now, I say that, and let me add this. There is no dominant team in college football. It's not there. That team is not there. And Kirby Smart is as good a coach as you're going to get in college football. but it would be it would. I mean, they're the second or third betting favorite right now to win the national championship behind Oregon, and they would. Kirby can show me, not that he has to. Kirby can show me how good he is if they win this, because there's nothing saying they can't or won't win this thing. They just don't have the best team. It doesn't seem like to me. I don't really know how you can say they got the best team. You just go watch them play. They cannot stand fortune. They're not good at that. They're not good at success, this team. And they're also not good at quitting at all. Like, they're not about quitting. They are going to go hunt you down and try to make it happen. But there's no dominant team. And, like, you can't tell me Georgia can't beat Oregon. I mean, Oregon's good now. They got a really capable quarterback. But this is going to come down to quarterback play. And, Oregon's got a really good quarterback. So does Texas. So does Georgia. I mean, there are some really good quarterbacks out there. But, Carson can't do it by himself. Quinn Ewers tonight, he was able to turn around and give the ball to the running back, who I think went for 180 or something on A&M. So it's Carson can do it. I think he's proven that time and time again. But boy, Georgia's got to get healthy. They're just not healthy the way that you need to be right now. But nobody is, to be honest with you. I mean, it doesn't look like Texas's offensive line, their best offensive line, doesn't look like he's going to play against Georgia. I mean, that didn't go so hot the last time with Georgia and them. So there's that. But Kirby doesn't have the best team. This is not the 21 or 22 team that went, 29-1 and was essentially the golden years, the golden age of Georgia football. That's not these guys. These guys are different than that. I mean, you're going to have to win a split decision or you're not knocking anybody out. Like, that's not who Georgia is right now. They're going to have to grind it out. And part of grinding out, too, by the way, is scoring points in the first half. There's way too much failure on the offensive side of the ball. Some of it is, it's team football. I mean, Tech had the ball a lot because they got off, they didn't get off the field. They were driving the ball. They weren't punting. They were either attempting, making field goals, and that's how football's played. And when they're milking the clock, Georgia doesn't have it. I didn't think Georgia played horrible on offense in the first half. They stalled out. They missed a really long field goal. I mean, that ball never had a shot. And then, they went for it on fourth and whatever. I mean, and then they had 2 punts. Like, that's not that bad. That's not the end of the world at all. I think they only had it 4 legitimate times. Maybe it was 5. But that's okay. That's okay. Then they scored 6 touchdowns in a row. Like, boom. And they scored on 6 drives in a row. Touchdowns. 4 in regulation and 2 in overtime. I mean, that's a lot of production. And you're like, well, what happened? What happened? I mean, Carson Beck, basically, is what I would say. I mean, the guy is not appreciated the way that he should be because of his girlfriend or because he smiles too much, or I don't know, dude. I think it's just so stupid after a while. I mean, he did not play well against Alabama necessarily. I mean, he threw interceptions against Alabama. I don't know that he didn't play well. He played well at times. This guy needs some help. The offensive line helped him against Tennessee, thrashed him. Just played really well. I think they played well enough against Tech, the offensive line. But the physicality on that group and the run game is just not like what Georgia's, sort of been used to, or the calling card, or, you got DeAndre Swift. I mean, Etienne's not out there. He can't play right now. I mean, so Roger Robinson being back out there made a huge difference. He was big on that second to the last drive. He made a 19-yard catch or an 11-yard catch. It was a first down, whatever it was. It was huge. So Georgia needs to really get healthy. Now, listen, the Tech game is going to go down as one of the great moments in this rivalry. And whenever someone tries to give you this notion about how XYZ is a rivalry, remember how the team reacted after they beat Florida. Remember how the team reacted after they beat Tech these last few years. Some of these are not like the others. They're just not. And, I do want to say this about Tech in Georgia. We saw people planting flags, and we've seen this in Tech, Georgia. The last time Tech won in Athens, Kirby Smart, they planted a flag right in front of his face, and he just jogged off the field. Like, what are you supposed to do? Not Ohio State. They're going to start a fight. We got pepper spray, which was ridiculous. And then you see Florida State. Mike Norvell's pissed. I don't blame the coaches for being pissed. I don't. It is a dumb thing, the flag planting, or I saw some guys at Texas, I didn't think this was that big of a deal, scraping the Texas A&M logo. But, Ohio State started a full-on brawl. And, the way Michigan acted, yeah, it was bad, but you don't get to, they're putting a flag at midfield, man. They're not raping people. Relax. It's not out of the order. You're so macho, bitch. Why didn't you get it done when you were playing? Everybody's a tough guy. No, you lost. It's just what it is. And if the other people want to rip up hedges or they want to, do childish things, that's on them, man. That's on them. That's their deal. It's not representative of you. But we saw this a lot. Auburn, Alabama. We got guys throwing people by helmets. It just, the one thing about Georgia that you'll know it's not going well when guys start doing crazy stuff. When they overreact to things. Ohio State is not a disciplined program. It's true. And Ryan Day, borderline, should be fired. That's a hot take, but I don't know how hot it is. It might be lukewarm because just the loss is one thing, but that whole thing about we're not going to have the flag plant, can't you work on substitution patterns and not having the other team, gifting the other team a win because of your coaching decisions or coaching mistakes? If Tech had won that game because of the 2-point conversion, that would have been all on Kirby completely. I don't think he would be difficult with us and that's his prerogative. He can do whatever he wants to do. But I don't think you would see him swinging out there or making excuses for players about, planting a flag. Why do you plant the flag? That's dumb. But what's dumber is reacting to it. Seriously. And, whenever Tech comes to Georgia, they go attack the hedges when they win. Well, they didn't do that this time. Why? Because Georgia won. Georgia, when they beat Tech, with the exception of Ben Jones' epic, thing, which was reactionary to what happened in 2008, again, everybody's so macho. Just take it to the locker room, man. It's all, just take it to the locker room. And, I did feel for Brent Key. I'm not ashamed to say that. There's nothing wrong with just completely going hard. You don't think Kirby felt pain losing to Alabama in the national championship in 2017 or earlier this year? It's painful. It's painful. That's why, you've got to be able to deal with the pain in a way that is productive or they're soul searching. You going out to just start a brawl afterward. And it was Ohio State. Michigan plants the flag and leaves. They look like a bunch of clowns, but there's not pepper spray. What are we using pepper spray for? I don't know what. I don't know sometimes about decisions that are made. If I were at Michigan, I'd be super pissed that our guys are getting pepper sprayed. And Ohio State guys got pepper sprayed too, I think. But, so security wasn't out there, so they got the cops out there, and it's just a bad look. We didn't get that in Athens. But I mean, I don't think it'd have been a full-on brawl at Georgia. In 2009 it was almost, but those two teams, that's not what Georgia is now. That's the difference. But I felt for Brent Key, and I felt like, I remember Josh Nesbitt in 2009 and them losing that game, Tech, in Atlanta. They were certain they were going to win that game. In 2009, I was certain they were too. And then with Sean and Caleb King, that's where we run this state comes from. And, it's hard to describe Tech, Georgia in a way for people not from, I would say almost not from Atlanta, but I would say certainly not from Georgia to understand. It's well, I mean, Georgia Tech, all right, you can put them down all you want to. You don't have to, you didn't grow up with them. You didn't, you don't understand the nose in the air, the elitism and all this stuff. Georgia's got plenty of elitism itself, believe me. But that Tech Georgia is what makes Georgia Georgia. Just like Georgia Florida, and if there's a nickname for the game, that's part of what makes Georgia. And the colors are so beautiful with Tech in the gold and Georgia in the red. It just, it's red, black, and silver, white, and gold. It is visually beautiful. It looks awesome. And I'm sure everybody at ABC was saying, I cannot wait to put this on next Friday night, next Black Friday in Atlanta. Can't wait for it. And they're right. They should be excited about it. It's one of the great college football rivalries that has gotten lost in a way that the Egg Bowl didn't. Why? The Egg Bowl was on Thanksgiving. Now you're going to see, because of ABC, that Georgia and Tech, that won't get lost anymore. They're not going to waste what they had Friday night. They're not wasting that on a Saturday for ESPN at noon. They've got a massive brand in Georgia. They're not letting that go. I don't know what the numbers are yet, but it will be a huge number, 8 million, something like that. It'll be one of the most watched Tech Georgia games ever. And I think for Georgia, coming out of it and knowing what I know now, you just had to win this weekend. I mean, people getting knocked out left and right in the top 15. And, Ohio State losing, Miami losing, it was a lot. There was a lot going on at the end of this year. And, Tech, one of these days, Tech is going to get Kirby. But this was a really good shot to do it, and it didn't happen. And that guy is something else, man. I mean, he understands how to adjust. But I have to say, this has been a challenging season for him, clearly, and this team, clearly. And it's hard. This has been a hard season in a way that 21 and 22 never even thought about, and way harder than 23. And, a win against Tech, that's a big deal. And you're playing in the SEC championship, and you got a lot to play for now. Not just a trophy and rings. You got a berth in the Sugar Bowl and a bye for a while. Rather than just 2 weeks, you get like basically 4 weeks. Yeah, it is 4 weeks off. That's a long time. And what we don't, Tuesday night will be so huge in terms of the college football rankings, college football playoff rankings. That will set the stage. Like, we know Georgia's in. Now the question is, are they hosting no matter what? Now they might be at this point, because it was just, the loser of the Big Ten will host. Notre Dame will host. Like, after that, I don't know. I mean, I almost need to, because Miami lost. Well, they're not going to host now. I mean, Indiana, can they jump Georgia with a win over Purdue? I don't think so. All those, and everybody's mad at the college football playoff. But I thought that Tech Georgia was one of the, I think a lot of people were ready to leave when the game was over. It was an exhausting, 4.5 hour ordeal. And we got to have it to where overtimes are only in one end zone. The back and forth is crazy. I have done a lot of overtime games. Okay, Purdue, Georgia, 2003, Tech, Georgia, in 13, and 13 and 14, and like the national championship in 17, the Rose Bowl. Those games were all in one spot. Now we're going back and forth like that. That seems just arcane and dumb. It actually doesn't seem like anything other than dumb. And I mean, Carson said after the game, we got 200 plays. You're not going to run out of plays. I mean, ran about half of them. So, I mean, it was a lot. But it was one of the great moments in Sanford Stadium history, actually. And it was certainly one of the big moments in Tech, Georgia history. But Sanford will turn 100 soon. But that night, I mean, Larry Munson had died to come back for that thing, man. Larry was definitely rolling over in his grave listening to that game in a good way. Because the place was rocking and rolling. And when Nate Frazier ended that insanity, it was a huge win for Georgia. Thanks for watching.